So I'd like to call up, speaking of sponsors, our Sapphire sponsor, welcome. CRC, thank you. Joe Ashley. Joe Ashley was our former chair, Kern EDC chair. And they have a big part today, especially talking about carbon capture projects. Just a phenomenal, diversified company. And we're both from North Carolina, and Tar Heel State. So maybe Joe will have a couple anecdotes about the beautiful blue sky in North Carolina. Joe Ashley, thank you.
So I've got Richard's phone here. I'm going to go through it as we speak. No, I just wanted to welcome everyone. I probably, if you're not feeling welcome at this point after hearing Lorelei speak, I can't help you, unfortunately. So, no, what I would like to do is ask you to look next to you at your tables, look next to you at the tables across from you, and welcome each other, because this is your team. In terms of collaboration, all the things that Lorelei talked about earlier, I think Matthias talked about it as well. What we do best here is work together to get things done, and so I would encourage everyone to continue in that spirit. We certainly are proud of the things that CRC are doing, but we couldn't do them without everyone in this room. Engineers who think up these projects, to investors who fund them, and scientists and construction workers who build them and permit them and operate them. So thanks everyone for being here. It's my pleasure to introduce the next panel, which is got one of my friends and colleagues, Ken Haney, who's going to speak about our carbon capture projects. But moderating that panel will be Willie Rivera, and I'll ask him to come up and bring the rest of the panel with him, and we'll get the next panel started, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the morning. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We've got an exciting panel for you here this morning. 4 different representatives from, I think, key partners in helping the county meet the goals that Lorelei talked about earlier. I think it's exciting. I think it's important to remember as we start this conversation that despite all the rhetoric you hear from Sacramento, despite a lot of the politics, a lot of the credible experts we work with on a daily basis have acknowledged CCS as a part of the state's strategy to meeting its goals. It's a necessary element of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and CARB says it, scientists say it, study after study has affirmed it. So what you're going to hear from today, or you'll hear a little bit more about some of the specific things each of the panelist companies are working on. And with that, I'm going to do a brief introduction so we can get to the first question. We've got Ken Haney, Strategic Advisor for Carbon Management at California Resources Corporation. Down at the end, we've got Garth Reucassel, my colleague over at Aera Energy, who serves as our Carbon Management Director. Hilary Petrizzo, who is a CCUS Commercial Development Manager at Southern California Gas Company. And then Alexei Vyssotski, close enough, General Manager for CCUS over at Chevron. So first question, and maybe we'll start with Ken, is hoping you can highlight your company's CCS strategy, how it ties to Kern County, what we're talking about today, and what are your long-term visions for success? Take it away.
Very good. Is the mic working? Good. So I'm waiting for my speech to come up on the monitor. It's not coming up.
Oh, boy.
But just kidding, just kidding. I'm prepared. So California Resources Corporation. The first question I usually get is, who are you and where are you going? Those are 2 questions I usually get. So who are we? For those of you who don't know, California Resources was formerly Occidental Petroleum in California. In 2014, Oxy spun off their California assets into California Resources. So that's our background. Why Oxy chose to leave California, I have no idea. Actually, I do, but I'm not going to talk about it. But here we are. California Resources. We're one of the 3 largest oil and gas companies in California, along with Aera and Chevron. CRC, about 2 years ago, chose to develop a business called Carbon TerraVault, which is kind of a parallel business now with our oil and gas production business. And Carbon TerraVault is directed at storing CO2 underground across the state of California. So our executive leadership is 100% behind Carbon TerraVault. I've been working on these projects for about 4 to 5 years. So CO2 storage is the framework or the basis of the company for carbon management. We do plan to participate across the value chain for carbon capture and storage. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, you have really 3 components. You have the source of CO2, which is the carbon capture piece. So you can capture off of point source emissions plants like steel plants, power plants, cement plants, or you can capture directly from the air, and we've had earlier people talk about direct air capture where you actually capture straight out of the air. CRC is involved in participating in all those areas, as well as the transport of CO2 to the underground storage locations in the county and up and down the state. And that's where our Carbon TerraVault business is in that storage piece. So CRC is participating across the whole gamut. We have land teams, we have government affairs teams, we have engineering, geology teams. We're engaged in working projects all the way across. We have our own power plants, we have our own steam generators, and we're advancing projects to do capture off of those. So CRC, you consider a holistic company here, both in oil and gas and in carbon management. With that, I'll turn it over to the next victim.
All right, so can you all hear me? I'm Alexei Vyssotski. I'm with Chevron New Energy. I'm assuming everyone knows about Chevron, right? Laureline mentioned long history of the Kern County with oil, so we've been here for 135 years. That's our community. We're #1 taxpayer, and we support a lot of the local initiatives, but we're here to stay. What you probably don't know is that last year we created Chevron New Energies, which is basically a new division within Chevron that does nothing but offers and accelerates lower carbon solutions. That's our goal, and we do a number of things. CCUS is one part that we do. That's where I come from. We also do hydrogen, we do renewables, renewable fuels, we do geothermal. So there's a portfolio of offerings that we provide. But that's our line of business, and the company dedicated $2 billion for this decade for us to decarbonize our own assets, and another $8 billion to build a business and help others to decarbonize assets. So whether it's a steel plant or cement plant or our refinery, all those lower, harder to abate sectors, that's what we focus on. So that's kind of our, why we're here and what we do. So we stood up our organization last year. We have a number of wins and made a lot of progress globally. And then it brings it back to the CCS itself. We set fairly aggressive goals. We said by 2030 we'll have 25 million tons of CO2 per annum injected. And to put it in perspective, a large hub would be 3 to 5 million tons per year. So probably it equates to 5+ large regional hubs to make that happen. So that's kind of the background. And then what about Kern County? So it's interesting that Kern County is our long-term, of course, place that we work in, but also it's becoming an innovation center for Chevron in the energy transition space. So we currently have 4 pilots, industrial scale, and 1 project in play. So we have a hydrogen pilot at geothermal. We have 2 technology demonstration pilots in capture. Once again, goals there we basically invest into in more novel technologies and help them grow. And one of the pilots should be turned on soon, right, Scott, this week? And so we're doing a lot of progress. And we have a full value chain project, like Ken mentioned, where you capture, transport, sequester, and we offer that solution to us and to other customers. But the long-term vision, I can see how the Kern County has a lot of talent, a lot of the jobs and skill sets that we need in CCS is very transferable from traditional oil and gas. So it's a natural progression there, and I can picture how it's going to become a regional hub for a number of activities where we can help to decarbonize and bring emissions from around California. But we're here to stay, and we're here to support the county in energy transition. Thank you.
Hi, Can you hear me all? Oh, great. So my name is Hilary Petrizzo, and I'm with SoCalGas, and similar theme. We've been in California for over 150 years. We own and operate over 100,000 miles of pipeline, 22 million customers, that we serve safely and reliably. So when SoCalGas thinks about the big picture, we're very focused on being the cleanest, safest, and most innovative energy company in the United States. So how do we get there? It's on emissions reductions, so our own fugitive emission reductions. It's on carbon management. It's on clean fuels, like others have mentioned. We're very focused on hydrogen. So that's the big picture for us. And then when we look at the opportunities out there, there's so much money coming from the federal government, $12 billion for carbon management. And when we look at, again, the other panelists have talked about the value chain of CCUS. So we're focused on the transport. Transport is what we do well. When we look at the DOE funding, there's this emphasis on a common carrier. So being able to provide that transport service, again, as the other panelists have mentioned, multiple sites that are looking to capture their carbon and have a way to have it offtake and transported to a permanent sequestration site. So that's really the vision for us. And like others have said, Kern County is our primary focus. We want to start in Kern County. We want to bring that federal money to Kern County to work on these projects so we can advance them from study to engineering, focusing on the permitting, the construction, bringing in jobs, bringing in economic development. So really the success of Kern County is also our success. And we're very focused. We have our own, net zero goal for 2045, which aligns with the state, which aligns with Kern County. So really that's our focus, is on providing that transport service, providing that common carrier service, and really leaning into our strengths of safety, and then of course working with the community.
Final victim. So Garth, Reucassel, work for Aera Energy. Those of you that don't know Aera, we are the original spin-off. So Shell and Exxon back in '97 decided that they wanted out of California. I don't know the reason, much like Ken doesn't know his. And they spun off all their assets into Aera Energy, and for 25 years we've been staying in Kern County and developing oil and gas. 2 years ago they stood up a carbon management team. Why? The same reason, right? To deal with our own carbon. We're a large carbon emitter, and we're focusing on our carbon right now. So we're sitting and watching people develop business and understanding where they're going, but we have plenty of our own carbon to deal with right now, and we're slowly developing that through the permitting process, and watching with envy at carbon management parks. I think the vision that Lorelei puts out, we would love to be a partner with Kern County to develop. But as we're moving through permitting, moving through Class 6, moving through all of these different things, we're assessing the viability of this business. And I think, long-term capital projects like we're talking about, multi-billion-dollar, you have ups and downs. And, anyone that watches LCFS pricing at the moment is probably, we're in a down right now. And we need to figure out how we stabilize the incentive programs for CCS in California before we really double down and move into this business wholeheartedly. But ultimately, we're kind of the slow, cautious, watching from the back, but doing all the business that we need to do to be ready for when I think the permitting, the incentives all line out to make this a business that actually can make money in, as well as decarbonizing California. So that's us. Willie, you back?
Okay. Thank you all. I think it's very much part of our mantra, and we've heard Lorelei talk about it, Richard talked about it. Kern County really believes in an all-of-the-above approach to meeting energy needs. How do you see CCS projects supplementing the broader landscape of emission-reducing technologies here in California? And we can start again with...
I can start that one.
Perfect.
So I just found out this morning that Lorelei doesn't like studies and data. Oh, data. You like data, right?
Only if it's in an environmental impact.
Okay, so all the studies that have been done, and there's, the IPCC, the United Nations, everybody's study, IEA, EIA, they all look into the future and they've said, okay, what does it look like in 2045? We have oil and gas still. We're not going to be without oil and gas. We've got to have oil and gas. We've got to have renewables. We've got to have fuel switching. We've got to have all these, everybody who's talked today, we've got to have it all. We've got to bring it all together. CCS, what part does it play? Well, every study says, in Stanford study in California, 15 to 20% of this reduction in emissions is going to come from carbon capture and storage. So that's across the board. Some places it'll be bigger than others, some places it won't be as big as others, but that's a lot. That's a big piece, it's a lot of emissions reductions. So CCS aligns perfectly well with renewables and battery storage and everything else we talked about today, and everything else that fits into the holistic Kern economy. So as kind of an old oil field guy, I have no real concerns about careers in the oil business for the next 15, 20 years. BJ, you're going to be fine. So just words of wisdom to everybody. It's going to take all the solutions coming together and all of us working together to get there.
No, that's very good. I agree with everything Ken said. And one thing I'll add is that, it is a portfolio of solution, right? So Ken mentioned that math does not work without CCS. So you got to do it. I think the other element is that by 2030, we'll achieve our targets, decarbonization targets, with proven technologies, right? Whether it's CCS or it's going proven technologies. If you look at 2050 and look at some of the forecasts, then only 5% of 2050 mitigated carbon is associated with the technologies that are proven today. So in the next 20, 30 years, you're basically flipping completely your portfolio of solutions has to be different to sustain the world, right? And so what we have now is that we can't really pick losers and winners yet in technology. You got to advance all you have. So carbon capture sequestration, you have a proven technology. We've done it for many years. It's a technology developed in the 1940s, right? And with CCS targets, you can reach this, it's easy, relatively easy. Now there's of course nuances, you gotta study it. But you can implement it now and make a real tangible impact on decarbonization, right? Meanwhile, you invest in other technologies, DAC, you invest in hydrogen, and advance those technologies, so prepare for your 2030, 2050 portfolio, which will be very different, right? So to me, that's where it is, as Ken said, you have to develop all CCS as maybe the biggest bang for the buck, and you can make a meaningful dent towards emission reduction.
Yeah, I agree. It's all of the above. It's all of us working together. For SoCalGas, as a utility, our customers are really focused on reliable service. So I do think CCUS brings that reliability component as we have all of these solutions working together. Another thing that we're doing at SoCalGas, we have a research and development group that invests in very early technology readiness stage projects. I had the opportunity to visit one where, again, it's a form of direct air capture. They're actually capturing CO2 from the ocean. So this is a company, Captura, that we've been working with. So like Alexei said, in the future, a lot of the solutions are going to be very innovative. And so we like being part of that. And I think everyone's read the letter from Governor Newsom about how there is no path to net zero without carbon management. So it's like everyone's saying, it's all above and it's everyone working together.
I could say essentially the same thing, again, or I could call Willie up and we can move to the next question. Because
That's great.
You get to start, Garth.
I'll start the next one. How's that sound?
Let him start.
It occurs to me that folks in the audience may not want to admit it, but maybe we should explain to everyone what carbon capture and storage actually is. You want to take that?
So I get the one that I didn't prepare for. Excellent.
Let's hear it.
Perfect. So for the oil and gas people in the room, I ask you to be patient. For those not in oil and gas, feel free to ask questions afterwards. So carbon capture and storage, you can capture carbon from any emission source or even just the air, right? That's direct air capture. And you're capturing a carbon from a stream at a different percentage from anywhere from pure CO2 streams in ethanol plants down to post-combustion at about 5%, 5 to 8%, depending on the process that you're burning the fuel in. You capture, get it into a pure form, and then transport it to the injection site. What is the injection site? Anything from depleted oil and gas, where we've produced oil and gas for many years through wells, you inject it back into that reservoir, repressure that reservoir back up, and it's stored geologically, recognizing that the oil that was there had been there probably between 1 and 2 million years, so we're reasonably confident that it'll stay there. I have a geologist next to me, so I need to be cautious of what I say. So we're storing it back underground safely and then monitoring to make sure that it doesn't come back up. That's depleted oil and gas. You also have saline reservoirs, which are deeper, where you can inject into those as well. So, that's from an engineer, the description of CCS. How's that, Willie? Did you understand? Did you understand?
Let's give him an applause. Thank God, now I know. I've been walking around for the last 2.5 years clueless, so thanks. Okay, so next question. Lorelei talked about us being in California, and while that carries its challenges, I think, the 4 companies here, I don't think by coincidence, are also located in Kern County, where we stand to make the most headway in this space. What do you see as the advantages, challenges of trying to do something in California? What if you had a magic wand, you could ask for one fix from Sacramento, what would it be?
Well, I'll start again because
Go for it.
Yeah, I want to answer one of those I was actually prepped for. Look, so California. Let's start with Kern. The advantages of Kern are clear. That's why we're all here. Lorelei's vision. Without that vision, I don't think you would have this amount of people coming here trying to solve these problems within that California context, right? The advantage is geologic setting. We have great geology. Without that, you're not going to store carbon. That's a big advantage. State incentives. The state incentives out there will make these projects more profitable than anything else out there. And I think if you look around the US, there's lots of projects that are getting announced, and most of these are penciling out with what we call 45Q, which is a tax incentive that the federal government's putting out. And it's $85 a ton. You need to build a big project to make that work. And we are still a nascent industry, so you have to bet big early. That's a tough place to be. California has a lot more incentives. We can start a little smaller. I think California will be the kind of the nursery of CCFs for the United States. That's all the positives. Now I'll switch quickly to the negatives. So CCS is inherently linked with oil and gas. Lorelei said it up front. We own most of the pore space. If you look at the pore space and how you have to consolidate the pore space to be able to inject, we've been around 148 years and we've locked up a lot of land over that time and a lot of pore space over that time. As such, we're going to be critical to the delivery of CCS in California. And if you've, most recent legislative session in California, we were, written out of certain incentives, written out of certain things. We are not politically favorable in California, and that's the main problem that we have. I think then some other fixes in LCFS, where we're at is the price today we were never going to be there, we were told, but we are. So fixing some of these incentives to ensure that we have stable regulatory, stable incentive structures so we can invest. We need to invest hundreds of billions of dollars to meet California's net zero goals by 2045. You can't invest hundreds of millions of dollars without stability in regulatory and stability in incentives. I'm done.
Thanks. Again, so I think we're all in agreement, but like Garth noted, I'm a geologist. I did actually work as a geologist here in Kern County, out at the oil rigs, so very familiar that the geologic potential is here in California, so that's a huge advantage. And again, CCUS and the oil industry are very much linked, so the retraining, it's very intuitive, I would say, to go from oil and gas to CCUS, so we do have that going for us. And again, like I noted, we have the support of the governor, and we do have support from the federal government with all the federal funding, so we're really looking at that. Garth mentioned regulatory, so we are a regulated utility, so really the focus for us is working with our regulators on how do we gain that ability to own and operate CO2 pipelines, so that is something that we need to work on as a regulated utility. Setting up that framework, again, the DOE is looking for a common carrier, so what sort of economic system will we stand up to meet that common carrier vision that the DOE is looking for? So those are the things that we're really focused on, I would say, is the regulatory aspects. And then as we're doing all of that, again, going through the stages of engineering, permitting, construction, and imperative throughout that would be the community engagement. So working with everyone in this audience, having that community engagement early, often. And I'm particularly excited to work with a lot of the groups in this room, including the colleges, Cal State Bakersfield. I see a great potential for that engagement so that these projects are successful and really truly benefit everyone, that these are projects that achieve climate goals, but do that in an equitable and inclusive way.
Very good. Yeah, I agree with all that. So just to emphasize, the pool of talent that California has is a big plus for us, right? So that is definitely a resource to move some of this project, both from universities, innovations, but also for the CCS, people familiar with oil and gas operation, like Hilary said, very transferable skill set. So that's definitely a big plus, and it's working well. I do want to add to Garth's comment about incentives. So if you look at the point source emissions, depends how you do the math, but probably 60% of point source emissions in California can be abated today, right? It's economic to do that. So it's a pretty big number, right? And that's the 45Q plus the LCFS. So those two things together, you have a large pool of projects you can do. Now, the question becomes, what will you do based on some of the headwinds? And the headwinds, yes, regulatory is a headwind. I would say time. Time doesn't play in our favor, right? To reach those 2050 global targets, you basically need to build 1 to 2 projects, CCS projects per week. And this week we haven't built any, have we? So we're little,
I haven't.
You have it. So we're a little behind. So we'll do it next week. So, but it's a huge, right? It's a huge investment. It's I usually say it's a next industrial revolution, right? We haven't had it since 1940s. But it's a lot of stuff we have to build, and obviously that the optimizing and operationalizing a regulatory pathway is a key for our success. The only other, I'll build on public acceptance. We did survey earlier this year in April in California, going to kind of voting age people and asking them, well, what do you know about CCS? And 57% said that not a whole lot. And that's pretty educated population here, but right, 57% didn't really know a whole lot. And it's consistent with other parts of the country. It's not just here. And then when you tell the same people explain the basics of what CCS is, then 57% says, yeah, I'll support that. Would you support that kind of initiative? So once they understand a little bit, like, yeah, that sounds good, I'll support that. So I think that education piece and engagement, community engagement, not the maybe formal, and as Lorelei said, business is personal, right? So we are here, we're in Kern County, we have to be, explain it, not with all the fancy diagrams, but right, explain what it means for each person, and I think that will help us with community acceptance. But those are a couple of things I had. Ken?
Yeah, believe it or not, I have comments on this. I'm not going to agree with everybody, first off, but
not surprised.
I have an advantage on this one because I did a panel in Houston a couple weeks ago and had the exact same question. And Garth was there, and I think he told me afterwards he didn't agree with anything I said, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. I look across the spectrum in California and what are our advantages here and what are our challenges here, and I think they're the same. And I look at our policy in California. Some of it gives us big advantages, but some of it hurts us. I look at our technical abilities in California and our framework for where our emissions are and how we can capture them. Same thing, our advantages and the economic power in California. California is an economic powerhouse, right? The 4th largest economy in the world. And that's an advantage. California should have a lot of resources to bring to bear to meet these goals. But we pay 50% more for energy than any other state in the US. That's not an advantage. So, that becomes an advantage and a challenge. But the one I'll talk about real quickly is policy. And we have great advantageous policies in California. We have the LCFS, we have cap and trade, we have the governor coming out and setting strong goals for carbon dioxide removal in 2035 and then 100 million tons a year in 2050. Those are strong targets to go after. But then we turn around and we turn rhetoric into policy. and we start putting roadblocks in the way of what we can do and how we can enact these projects. So in California, we just have to get aligned, and we have to stopping ourselves from advancing some of these projects, and that's my soapbox.
And maybe I'll add just one more thing that can make me think about it is, you know, a lot of discussion that happens at the state level or federal level, it's all hypothetical, right? It's models, it's concepts. And so I think what Kern County does is moving the discussion to real projects, right? And that's where I like to say always operationalize things. So try to build some of these projects here in county and truly then have a real discussion. Okay, yes, conceptually that's what you agree or disagree, but here's a project in front of you, and let's talk about details. To me, that's the next step, and that's what Kern County is doing, and that's what I'm applauding Kern County for. But you got to make it real. You got to make it specific projects. You got to talk about it, talk about pluses and minuses and risk and mitigate this risk. But to me, that's the next step, and that's what we are looking forward to do right here in Kern County.
Okay, thank you all. So I think we have some time for questions. I don't know if we're set up with a microphone somewhere, or if we can be. Do we have questions? Do you have answers?
Question over there.
Someone over here? Go for it.
How do you prove 100 years of sequestration when you have so much penetration into the reservoirs in terms of idle wells and existing?
You heard that? Who wants to take it?
Yeah.
So for those that didn't hear, the question was, how do you prove 100 years of sequestration when you have so many levels of penetration in a reservoir vis-a-vis existing wells?
Yeah, I mean, I can start on that one. You guys can jump in. First of all, we have 50 years of experience of injecting CO2 into reservoirs in the Permian Basin, controlling it, injecting it, producing it. And here we've been injecting natural gas. We've been injecting other gases into reservoirs for years. So we look at wells as data points. They're data points that we can use to monitor CO2 plumes underground. And we fully know how to abandon wells so that we don't have issues with communication to surface. So this is what the oil and gas business does. This is what the people in this room are good at. This is what we've been doing here in Kern County for 100 years, and we'll continue to do it. And it's a perfect fit for our industry. And this is why we can't do it without the oil and gas industry. And this is why.
No, that's perfect. And to Ken's point, so oil industry kind of de-risked a lot of that, right? The first injection, CO2 injection, was in 1974, right? That's a long time ago. I wasn't even born yet, but and it was in Texas. I guess I was about to be born, maybe actually. So it's a long time, right? So so offshore, we injected first in the 90s, and that was in Norway, right? So there's like 20 million tons injected to Norway and monitored. And so the industry as a whole, we know how to transport, we know how to inject, we know how to capture, like all this is proven technologies. To your point, now we got to prove it, right? And if you look at Class 6 and expectation of that, there's a lot of details on what's expected of us, and they're pretty high expectations, right? And so it's back to the, yes, proper abandonment and coming up with methodology for that and monitoring. And the good thing about it, as you monitor, you need to look for the early signs of something going not right. And then what do you do then? Well, you stop injecting, right? And that's where I think the future is a daisy chain of storage sites. And in case if one doesn't work the way it is, and we have examples of, right, project that didn't work out and they shut in now. So it's going to happen. The question is how you monitor it, how you stop it quickly enough, and what do you do next? And that's where that partnerships and daisy chain of storage sites is really what's needed to make it all work. Good question.
I've got one thing to add on that one. Technically great. I just think from an oil industry perspective, us saying just trust us is probably not going to work. For 100+ years, we've kind of slowly moved towards being probably the most hated industry in the world. And us saying just trust us is not going to work. So, we have to do a better job of engaging, educating, and building that trust back as we move towards injecting. So, it's working with communities on monitoring plans, working with communities for them to understand what we're doing next to them, et cetera, that goes hand in fist with the technical as well. We do know how to do it, trust us, but we need to build that trust again.
Okay, any more questions? Throw your hand up, there we go.
So whenever I talk to people and tell them I'm working on a supercritical CO2 pipeline, they bring up Denbury. Even though we've had pipelines for a long, long time, one big accident scares everybody. So how do we get past the public perception that CO2 pipelines are extremely dangerous and we're going to kill somebody with them?
Yeah, no, that's a very valid question. I think we are all familiar with that incident, and the work that's been done since then by the Department of Transportation, the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Agency. There's been a lot of steps since then to study what went wrong, to see how we can make sure that doesn't happen again. And there are fines that came out of that. There are new procedures that came out of that. In the recent bill that was passed, SB 905 in California, there's a huge emphasis on pipeline safety. So absolutely, we take that seriously, and that's something that, with our track record of integrity management, that we're very focused on and working again with what comes out from the federal government on that to make sure we operate these pipeline safety. Because you're right, if we had an incident, that does not bode well for the future of CCUS. So we do want to get it right.
Okay, we got time for one last question if someone's brave enough to ask it. If not, we've got more time to, there we go.
Hi, good morning, good morning. Well, it's great to hear about each of your kind of companies' respective plans and goals for the next couple of decades. One of the themes, excuse me, over the last couple of years worth of conferences that I've been at is collaboration. We hear that a lot. Can you guys maybe talk about, provide any context between sort of practical collaboration that you can do between your companies or that you are doing between your companies?
Can everyone sign an NDA?
I know.
No. Look,
I think you answered.
well, look, we if you just look at the land ownership maps across Kern County as a starting point, you can clearly see collaboration is going to have to happen to find the amount of storage space required for California. How we step into that, it's a case-by-case basis. To Lorelei's point, it's personal. All the people on this panel have talked to each other at some point in time on business. How those relationships build over time, it's up to the companies and the cultures within those companies to work together. So, it's early days, but I think you look at the oil industry as a whole, we've jointly developed projects across the world, but it takes time, right? It takes time to learn each other. It takes time to build that relationship. And we're in, first and second date type territory at the moment in this industry.
Yeah, you want to go? Oh, I would just add that's, this whole transition, this whole energy transition to clean energy in the system, it's all a transition. And, we've been competitors for a long time. And as competitors, we had to collaborate on certain things. But now, we're in a position now, especially on land and pore space, where we're going to have to work together and collaborate. And hey, we've been interfacing with these guys for a couple of years, and hasn't been easy. It's not going to be easy, but again, in order to move this forward for the good of everybody, we're going to have to get there. So we're working in that direction. The question came straight from the light, so I'm looking straight into the light. But I see the light. But we're gonna have to do some collaboration.
And maybe I'll just add real quick. For transparency, this space really took collaboration to the next level. I think we used to collaborate with our business partners and with oil companies. In this space, we're actually entering different collaborations, whether it's cement plants, or it's a steel, or it's a technology, or investing into technology. So comparing traditional business to the new energy, it's totally different level of collaboration and partnership that you'll see over the next few years as announcements come out.
Okay. Well, thank you, panelists. Let's give them a hand. Hope you all found this informative. I hope you keep asking questions. This is obviously going to be a big part of Kern County's future, so I'm excited for it. Next, I have the pleasure of calling up Ms. Suzanne Noble, Senior Director of Production Operations at WISPA.